Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is the 29th of August. Today we're doing a frontline update beginning with Kherson. So in the Kherson region, the Ukrainians are moving in reinforcements towards the contact line. You have the 121st Territorial Defense Brigade, which has been moved closer to the Kherson region, and it's supposed to be reinforcing something called the Thunder Tactical Grouping. I was previously unaware of this tactical grouping, but I would assume that it's similar to how on the Zaporozhye front you have the Maroon Tactical Grouping, you have the 9th and 10th Army Corps. So the Thunder Tactical Grouping is probably something similar where you have coordination of various different brigades on the Kherson front that allows them to act as a unified body. But that's very interesting because they've been operating for a while. You could look at Google. If you translate the Thunder Tactical Grouping to Ukrainian and then you search it up on Google, there's plenty of press releases mentioning this grouping going back many months. So this is pretty interesting because I haven't really heard much of anything about this grouping from English-speaking sources. And also the name Thunder is pretty interesting given the context around Kherson. It would sort of imply a breakthrough, a thunderous breakthrough. But again, that's just a name. And looking at the units that are on the Dnieper River, you do have mainly territorial defense brigades on the Ukrainian side. You have an artillery brigade. You have the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. You have the SBU Detachment Alpha, which was spotted around this area. You can see it over here. There's a reconnaissance battalion. There's support regiments. Here you have some other TDF brigades. Here you have a National Guard brigade. So that gives you an idea of the Ukrainian units over here. They're not the most elite units that Ukrainians have. Those are most likely around Zaporozhye, and then you have National Guard units as well. Those are of a pretty good caliber compared to TDF units at least. And then you have the SBU. So there is a variety of units in this area. But for now, there's nothing that would indicate that the Ukrainians are planning an imminent assault. But what we are seeing is a general increase in artillery due to the movement of the 406th Artillery Brigade towards the Dnieper River. They're increasing fire, increasing mortar fire as well. You also have DRG activity, not around Kazachi Lahari, not as much around the areas of Kherson City, more so to the west, where you have Ukrainian forces operating in some of these islands that could be considered a gray zone. They're sending in small DRG forces and in speedboats at night, and they're not really doing anything permanent. So it's not like establishing a bridgehead. It's just sort of these harassment operations, reconnaissance operations, meant at also spreading the Russians thin across the entire Dnieper River. That's about it for the Kherson front. But the Ukrainians, they are also sending in HIMARS. They're bringing them closer to the line of contact in order to launch strikes on Russian targets that are pretty deep into the Russian lines. If we look at the distance between the front lines and this specific target, it's about 53 kilometers away. So what happened was the Ukrainians, they launched, I believe it was 2 HIMARS strikes yesterday. They hit the port of, what's it called? The Zalizhny port over here. You can see the geolocation. And they were able to destroy a Predel-E over-the-horizon radar, which is a very, very long-range radar. It has detection of hundreds of thousands of miles greater than some of the other radar systems that are generally used by militaries. This is sort of Russia's cutting-edge technology. They have, I believe, 25 of these systems, these Predel-E OTH radar systems, and each one is worth about $200 million. That's what Ukrainian and Western sources were writing in their articles. And it was being covered by this Lear 2 electronic warfare system to try to give it protection. And that electronic warfare system was also destroyed in the HIMARS strike. So this is very interesting. This over-the-horizon radar was most likely stationed in this area to give the Russians a good idea of all the Ukrainian drones, all of the Ukrainian assets that were flying around the Black Sea. And now one of them at least has been destroyed. Now, around Robotyne, the Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister now alleges that the Ukrainians have fully captured Robotyne, and this comes a couple of days after most of the Ukrainian sources made the same claims. And this is a common theme from really both defense ministries, both Russian and Ukrainian, that they wait a few days before announcing the official capture of a town. Usually, I guess that would be because they want to wait for the town to be fully cleared. And the Russian sources are disputing this. They're still claiming that they have a foothold in the southern outskirts and that Ukrainians are sending in reinforcements to finally cleanse the town once and for all. we're seeing reports of the movement of the 15th National Guard Brigade to help out the 47th Brigade in the area around the village of Robotyne. So that would be generally around this sector over here, in between these two parallel lines. And the 15th National Guard Brigade, we know that's stationed in this area. So I'll find them on the map. I believe this is the 11th one actually. Here is the 15th. If we zoom in, there's some new geolocated footage that I have added to the map. Here's video from the southwestern corner of the village. This is an area where we didn't really receive many geolocated videos from. So this gives us a good idea that the Ukrainians were also located in this area, because the Beaver drone unit, a Russian drone unit, they released a video of an FPV strike on a Ukrainian position in a certain house in this region. And then here we have videos of the Russians shelling the Ukrainians after they entered the house. You know, the Ukrainians, they dismounted from their infantry fighting vehicle, they entered the house. I don't know if they were still in the house when the artillery strike happened, but the same house was hit by artillery. And that gives us a general idea of what the Russians are doing now. Once they've fallen back to their defense lines around here, they are now hitting the Ukrainian forces as they begin to send in further reinforcements and try to set up permanent positions within the village of Robotyne itself. And the Ukrainians are also increasing their artillery output in this region. But what I'll say is that the bulk of the fighting has shifted from the village of Robotyne further to the east. Further to the east is where you're seeing the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, and you're seeing elements of the 118th Mechanized Brigade, which is somewhere over here. I get these units mixed up. 118th is over here. And they're working in tandem to attack the Russian positions that are directly to the west of Verbove. In the fields to the east of Robotyne, the Ukrainians have two main local goals that they want to attain. First of all, is securing this height over here. This is called height 136.8. This is a local height. It's located on a hill. The hill is over here. And you can see that the height is also located in the same area as 3 geolocated videos, which I mentioned in my last video, where there was clashes between the Russian and Ukrainian infantrymen, and there were FPV strikes on both sides, which would indicate that the Russians are trying to hold the defensive line over here. They're trying to hold back Ukrainians, preventing them from reaching the hill located further to the south around here. That hill would give the Ukrainians sort of a local dominance, as they'd be able to look over the adjacent fields. They'd be able to get a good vision of Novoprokopivka and perhaps even of Verbove, or at least of the defensive lines to the west of it over here and over here. And there's another height that the Ukrainians are aiming to secure, and that's the one over here called height 110.3. This is a height that's actually behind part of Russia's prepared defensive lines just to the west of Verbove. And so this would indicate that the Ukrainians are actually beginning to attack this defense line head on. And there is some evidence to point in that direction. So NASA's infrared sensors that actually detected heat anomalies on August 27th, which show that there were these visible bush burns in the area over here where I'm circling it. And that would indicate that the fighting has shifted in that direction. It could be artillery strikes, could be the fact that the fires and the fighting is just getting closer and closer to that direction. And there's also fires not just going on in the bushes that are basically to the west of the defense line, which would be around here, but there's also fires going on in the area in between the Russian anti-tank ditch, which is over here. It's closer to the Ukrainian lines, the anti-tank ditch. And then behind that anti-tank ditch, you have this dragon's teeth. And the entire reason why it's set up this way is to prevent Ukrainian mechanized assaults. So the only way for the Ukrainians to really break through in this region is by using smaller groups that are advancing through the fields, through the hedgerows, which does take longer. And so we are seeing the fighting shifting in the direction per the fire maps. It's still unclear if the Ukrainians have broken through. I think we would have seen footage of that. And we actually have footage of the Ukrainian side hitting Russian forces that are located behind these defensive lines, basically, which would indicate to me, at least, that the Russians are still in control of this area behind the defensive lines. So here's just an example of an AFU FPV strike on Russian soldiers east of the defensive line, and that's from August 26th or perhaps earlier. So that's adding another level of nuance. Maybe recently, over the past few days, the Ukrainians have broken through. I can't confirm that. And then if we go to the north, here's another video, a compilation video actually, of Ukrainian FPV strikes on Russian forward positions. And these Russian forward positions, they're not within the anti-tank ditches, they're in hedgerows that surround it, like in the nearby hedgerows, like maybe over here, like in each field you have adjacent to it a bunch of these hedgerows. And that's where you have the Russian forward positions, and they are the ones that are trying to keep the Ukrainians at bay. And the FPV strikes are going on in the areas around here, which would indicate that the Ukrainians have not broken through past these anti-tank ditches and Dragon's Teeth just yet. I'm also seeing reports from both sides indicating that fighting has started popping up in the area between Robotyne and Kopani, so around here. And there's no discussions of any advances just yet, so it seems like the Russians are holding the line over here. But it is interesting because this would indicate that the Ukrainians are trying to secure their flanks, because definitely at the current moment you could see how Ukraine's flanks are threatened because they have basically caused this thrust in Robotyne, and the Russians do have these favorable positions in the heights that are around Kopani that overlook Robotyne, or just to the east of Robotyne on the eastern flank of Robotyne in Verbove. And so that's why the Ukrainians are trying to basically level the battlefield. Over here, you can see how they're trying to level the battlefield on both flanks now, and trying to take over the heights that are overlooking some of their positions in order to allow them to sort of solidify control before they go forward into other defensive lines even further south. So we're going to have to see if anything really manifests regarding Kopani. For now, the Russians do have solid control over that region. And before I end the video, here's a look at the topographic map so you get an idea of everything I've been referring to. And I overlaid it with the Google Maps satellite view basically, so you get an idea of where everything's located. Robotyne is over here, Verbove is over here, and Kopani is over here. As you can see, the Ukrainians are pushing southwards towards the heights over here, and you can see them marked in red, and I'm going over it with the light blue color. And those are the heights that would, for instance, overlook positions in Novoprokopivka, which you can see over here, and just generally give the Ukrainians a level of cover that they don't have as much of right now. It would also overlook Verbove at the same time. And then looking at Kopani, Kopani is over here, as I said before, just to the west of Robotyne. That area also has a local height in that region that the Russians currently have control over. So that gives the Russians an opportunity to fire onto Ukrainian positions in Robotyne. And so in order to protect their flanks, the Ukrainians would presumably try to increase pressure in that region. But for now, as I said before, the line is stable. So that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.